And we will start again. I apologize first for my voice. It decided that you will be able to understand what I'm saying. We are going to continue talking about WxEDM. In the last session we stopped while trying to understand the different function of the Windows family of function. So these functions are stored in the global procedure, the collection called CPR Windows. And I'm going to go on them right now. There we are. So that's all the procedure that are managing the complex UI. And we already saw yesterday how the system was set to send the message to the main window and let the main window open and close everything that was needed, so that you would not have any GPF. Now we are going to continue to look into this function. The next function that we're going to look at is Windows Display List. This is the function that is called each time you need to display or refresh the Windows bar that is at the bottom of the main window, and this bar acts as an easy way to open, display, refresh any of those windows. There is also in this bar a right-click menu on each of the buttons that allows you to close a window directly from there, or even to close all windows from there. So we're going to have a look at that now. Okay. So each of these windows that we are managing has its original name, of course, but because we are opening several times the same window, it also has an alias. This procedure can be called different ways. So that's why we have parameters that can be used or not. Let's talk first about the case where there's no parameter, you're just calling display list. That was what we were doing before in the previous code. So in a case like that, or in any case, we're first checking if the first window is open somewhere. The reason for that, when you're creating code for a complex UI like this one, you cannot at any point be sure that you're going to have open, closed, in memory, active, whatever, anything in the state that you think it's going to be all the time. There are going to be cases where, well, something happened. It may be that you coded with your feet that day. It may be that you added function. It may be lots of things, but it's a complex UI, and you will have complex cases. So this is something that should be called only when the first window is open, because we are displaying in it. However, if at any point it is called when the first window is not open, you have to fail gracefully. And for that, I'm first testing, is the first window open? You have to be fault tolerant. So if it's not found, well, we are not doing anything clearly, because the purpose of this is to display something inside the window. This allows, by example, to have this kind of code be called without any problem from windows that are used both in the main UI and in the project initialization code, which means before the first window is open. Stewart, you're going to have a neck ache if you don't move a little bit somewhere. You're both in line, and Stewart is trying to see me. Sorry. So I have some, thank you. So we're first testing is that window is open, and then we are doing, in fact, all the work here. So either a window name has been passed as parameter and there's some specific work to do, or we want to refresh the whole thing. Currently we're talking about that, so we are refreshing the whole thing here. We are first deleting the whole looper, and then we are looping on the array of windows. For each window at that point, we are just doing a check. Once again, there may be cases where the window has already been deleted or not open yet or anything of the type. Or there may be just a bug somewhere because your UI is more complex than you thought it was. So you check, is the window in question, the one that is in my array, really existing? If it is existing, then you add it in the looper. If it does not exist, you don't do anything, you don't remove it from the array, because that may be just a case of something happening before something else. So we are working in a very asynchronous system here, and you have to have this kind of checked all the time. This does not mean that I have an orphan information in my array. It may be the case, but most of the time it's just going to be a timing problem. So I am not deleting the information, I'm just not using it. And if till the end of the life of the program this window is never there, well, I'm just ignoring it, and that's the end of it. So this is the kind of programming that looks kind of sloppy, but in fact it's not. It is just adapted at a synchronous system. So that's basically a looper, and we are displaying each time the name of the looper in it, and storing its alias so that we can work on it.
So what happens if one of your windows pops up a locking window, an error message that it locked that one window and all the rest that counts as a child? Will it go away when you close the window normally? I don't know how that works.
When there's an error message somewhere?
Error message, it pops up, caution, you did something wrong. It locks that one window, but it doesn't lock the sister windows. So you could ignore that and go do something else and then close the program later. And is it going to have any problems when it hits that error message?
You know what? I don't know. We'll have to test it. You're leaving? Well, guys, have a safe trip back, and see you next year.
Figure out a way to smuggle more rum next year.
Bye-bye. I don't know. I don't think I was in that configuration that it occurred. I'm not sure what's going to happen, and clearly that's something that needs to be tested. However, I'm never making any mistakes, so that's why I don't have any error message. So that's why I couldn't test it, clearly. So that is the case where we're refreshing the whole shebang. And the other case is when you have something that changed in one of the windows. And in that case, we are just refreshing its title. So this is the case here. If we are calling this function with a window alias, then we are doing that. Why are we doing that? Well, by example, you open a search window. At that point, the search window is empty. So the button says search. And then you start typing in the search window the words that you want to search for. And you're calling at each time this procedure so that your button in the thing tells you searching for the word English. So you'd have search : English. And as you're typing, the main window is refreshed all the time. Same thing happens when you are opening a Word document and you are doing a save as. The name of the document change, so that should be reflected here, and this is what it's called for. Now there is a second parameter here called iParFrom, and it's set to 1 by default. This allows me to display information in the looper starting at a certain position in the array. Why? Well, as you have seen, the looper has a left button and right button, and that allows you to go to the next page of things and the previous page. This is not a looper functionality, this is just my code. And it is done with a very, very simple trick. Depending on the button and the number of cell visible in the looper, I'm just going to remove the right number or add the right number to a counter and say, well, the next display is going to start at that. That's all. So the whole functionality is basically just a counter. And we can see that if we go in the main window, in the buttons in question, let's say that this is the right button, and we are going to the, once again, it's in your collection of procedure, so Windows looper next, and we are doing this incredibly complex code to manage the whole thing. First, of course, we are looking at how many windows we have to display total. Well, if it's less than 1, there's nothing to display, so go away. We just exit. Then, here, we are calculating how many positions in the looper are fully visible. So I'm using 156 because this is the size of one element of the looper. And I am just calculating how many of them are fully visible. If a button is only partly visible, you can click on it, no problem. But I don't want to count it in the one that are already visible. I want it to be at the beginning of the looper. Also, I have to do this kind of thing because the size of the main window can change, and the number of cells that are going to be visible in it is going to change too. Once I have that, I'm just adding that to my counter, checking if I'm not outside the boundaries of my array, and if I'm not, then I'm just calling Windows display link and start at that new position. So that is for Windows looper next. We have the same thing for Windows looper previous, with the test here being slightly different. That's the only difference. Yes?
Up there where you have return to capture, what is the difference between using return to capture and just leaving that blank and doing nothing and just letting it fall out of the...
Return to capture is forcing a focus, is giving the focus back to a window. If you just exit the thing, there is nothing that says that the focus is going to go anywhere else it was before. So I'm used to do that for everything that is UI related. I will exit a procedure that is not UI related, but I will do a return to capture for anything that is UI. Here basically I'm saying you just click on the button, there was no reason to click on the button, go back to the window. That's all. But it is true that in a case like that, that would probably do the exact same thing. Just a habit that I have. If I'm in the UI, I'm doing that. So what do we have now? Window close. Did we look at that one already? Yes, we did. Yes, we did look at that one. Window get info. This is just a way to extract information from the array of window structure. Now it is true that because this is a global procedure, the array itself is not protected by anything, which means that I could, from somewhere else, access it directly if I wanted to. However, it's not because you are coding in a global procedure that you have to be sloppy. You want to access some variable, you create a function that is getting the value and the right way with the logic associated with it. You can code as cleanly in a global procedure that you would code in a class. The only difference is that there is no mechanism to force you to do so. So it's not a mandatory sentence, it's purely voluntary. So what we're doing is getting the alias from the parameter, the type of information that we want to retrieve, extracting from the array the matching the matching element, if any, and for that we are just doing an array seek. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the array functions are extremely powerful. And by example, in a case like that where I have an array of structure, I can seek a value on any of the members of that structure inside the array. So I don't have to look for it. I'm just using the correct syntax as linear. It's going to go through all of them very fast in memory. The name of the property that we are looking for is inside this constant as usual. And you can see that the CST window alias constant contain CCS alias. And we're going to look for that value. If we find it, then we are going to extract that element inside a structure that is local and then return the appropriate information type. Now, I could have had here a kind of code for which information do you want, and based on that code return one or the other. Here I decided to pass the exact name of the property I was looking for and use indirections here to return it. This is not the kind of coding that you want to use if you are not using a constant here to pass the information. Now, because I'm using a constant when I'm calling this, I know that I'm not going to type it wrong. And therefore I can do an indirection on it without any problem. If you do not use the constant here, you're going at some point to type it wrong, and you will get an exception here because that field just doesn't exist. That variable doesn't exist, sorry. So if you're sloppy in your calls, you get an error. If you're using constant, there's no problem. So depending of how you work, or if you work with several people who may not know any better, you may want to do a one exception around that so that you can fail gracefully if there's a problem. Yes?
On the array seek, I believe one of the choices is as linear and another choice is as linear first.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered, what is the difference between those two?
I don't have a clue. And to be perfectly honest, each time I need to use array seek, I immediately go in the help and I look at which is the option that I need to use and what is the correct syntax, because it is so powerful and so versatile that you can use it on array in 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 1 dimension of this, 2 dimension of the, and the syntax changes each time. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the syntax of that thing. No way. So each time I'm going to help, and I find out that as linear first. I think I remember something now about this as linear first. There is a as linear first and an as linear next. And that means that you can, instead of always with as linear starting from the first item and a search, you can at some point continue to search. So you would do a as linear first, find an answer, then continue to search in the array from that point with as linear next, and so on and so forth. And at the time when you want to restart from the beginning, you would use as linear first again. Just like a hread first, hread next, the same principle. So
What I hear you saying is, as linear is going to start at first go,
and find one answer.
and you will only get one answer, and that's it.
Yeah.
But if you think you got multiple things you need to find, then as linear first is your
Yeah.
opening shot, and then the next will
Yeah.
continue where it left off.
That is my understanding. I do not guarantee anything on that thing, but
Makes sense.
I think it's that, and it matches perfectly the way they're working on any other function. So there's a pretty good chance that that's the way it's working.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's all for Windows Get Info. Windows Open, we looked at it. Who's dinging? We have a Windows Close All available also, which basically is going through the array, and if the window is found, once again, is closing it there, and then of course deleting the whole array of windows. And we went through all the Windows functions, so that is all you need to manage your complex UI and have all these windows open at the same time. Now, what is missing into there, and some of them I may at some point implement them, is by example checking if one specific window is already open. So for the user form, by example, you would check, and you would have a function called window is open, and pass the parameter saying, okay, it's going to be something that is using the window name w_user. You don't know the alias. And it's going to be something that we have as a title or as a property or something, this specific value, because you know that when you're opening a user, this is what you're going to set in it. And it would go through the array and check that it is there, so that you would be, at that point, able to either refuse to open the same form a second time, or open it in a specific mode, like a read-only mode. That does not exist right now. And I'm sure that there are some other functions that we could add in the Windows management to do this or that or the other. By example, reorganize all window, and you would have all the window as a cascade. Or tile windows, Windows tile, and you would have all the windows like that organized everywhere, and so on and so forth. At that point, you have your whole UI system ready for you, and you can do whatever you want. We could also create a mode that we would call the simple mode, beginner mode, whatever, that would prevent to open twice the same type of window. So we will have only one search open at a time and one document open at a time, which would, as an effect, basically transform the complex UI into a model UI as a result of the number of things that you can open. And that could be the beginner mode, so that people are not confused when they start using the program. Now, the fact that there are two modes may confuse them further. So, once again, I don't think there's any absolute answer for anything UI related. I think that's all I have to tell you about the Windows section. What do you want to look at?
The window alias is not just the Windows name.
No, no, no. When you're opening, okay, I'm going to go back on that one.
Go back to that because I think I missed that.
Absolutely. Did you look at the help about opening sister or a child, open sister? There's a very little information about that in the help. It is a point that is kind of this is not the kind of thing that is done by a lot of people, so they are clearly not documented that very well. The principle of the thing is that, well, if you open twice the same window with the same name, you don't know which one is what. So you have to give, in that case, an alias to the window, which means that there is an alias property already there. If you don't do anything and you use the classic open statement, this alias property is going to be filled with the name of the window, so the both value will be the same. However, if you use open child or open sister, you can specify by code an alias. And that is done via a very strange syntax. The syntax is this. Instead of passing the window name, you passing a string between quotes with, and there I should put the quotes to be perfectly clear. You are passing this to your open child. If you do open child here with that, instead of just the window name, well, it's going to open the window name, but under that specific alias. At that point, you are on your own. You are the one giving the alias to the window. There is no mechanism that I know of that will give different aliases to different windows that I know of. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, well, I don't know who's calling me. Maybe they are already giving me an alias because this is a specific process, and they know which alias they want to use. I don't give a shit. You can use the alias you want. So I'm checking at that level if there is already an alias in the name that is given to me. If there is one, I'm keeping it. If there isn't one, I am creating an automatic one with that, so that I am different than the regular one that you're going to use anywhere, and with a rank value that increments all the time and is never decremented. So when you're deleting a window, you will just have a hole in your list and nobody cares.
65,000 windows, well then you're in trouble.
Not really, because it's a long int.
That's true. I don't know that number off the top of my head.
2 gigs.
Is it, yeah, 2
I think that I think that if you go to the end of that rank, your processor would have melted before that. But we can always change it and do it as an integer on 8 if you want. I'm not sure that would be necessary, really. So yes, I did think about it, absolutely. I am that devious. So that answer your question about the alias? Yes. And what other code would you like to look at? Why?
Because I downloaded it and it was a corrupt zip. And I just haven't downloaded it again.
That's a good reason. Well, let's see what we have over there. We have all the classes. So that's my list of bugs. Yeah, and I have a, as you can see, I have a different one for the EDM project, so that I'm not crashing it when I'm replacing the one from the replication. That's the docs class, and as you can see, it has quite a few functions. That's the project, users, that's the replication part. Remember, this is the password for your files. I've seen it repeatedly, years after year. So, because I've been using that password in my example code since the first thing in 2005 or 7, and I'm sure there are still people using the same one. I don't know what we're interested in, so.
I have a question on that HPass. It was very disturbing to hear that somebody could take a debugger and more or less just see what else.
And that is true in any program coded in anything.
I realize that. If one is running something via RDP and remote desktop, and you know the hacker is not inside your facility, so all he's got is the remote desktop on his end, I'm thinking he would not see your password.
We are not in that case at all. In order to use a debugger against a program, you have to be physically on the machine, or do a remote control on the machine, of course. If you do a remote control and you have the debugger on that machine, then you're physically present. What the hacker needs in order to be able to do this kind of attack is your executable. If he has your executable and he can run it, just a copy of the executable of the demo version of whatever is using the same password, then he just install on the machine, crack the password, and after that can go attack your files because he knows the password and the password doesn't change. One of the technique to avoid that, or to improve the chances of not having this kind of problem, and that's the technique that my colleague Francis Morel is pushing, it is to use a different password per machine. So in fact of having a should be replaced there, you have in fact a calculated password based on, and there you select what you want, the MAC address, the name of the file, the name of the user, the name, and so on and so forth. The protection component that Francis is providing contains a function that does just that. So you just have to call set password with this combination of parameter, and you get a calculated string that will be different on each computer. In that case, somebody cracked the password on one machine, another machine, it's a different one. Now, there are a series of drawbacks to that. If your customer sends you files because there's a problem and you need to check them out, well, you don't know what password they have been coded with. You don't have a clue. And it's only on the customer machine that you can recreate that password, which means at that point you need a separate utility. You need to remote control on the user, the precise user machine where and do that. A second problem is when you're using a hyperfile client server and you have clients that are connecting from different machines. Then you need to have a centralized way to calculate the password. A third problem is with the backups. When you do a backup by just copying your file, it is using that specific password. When you do a restore, it's often because your hard drive died. You change the hard drive, you modify your computer, and you cannot restore the thing because you don't have the correct password. So Francis is pushing very hard to use that technique, And on that specific point, I do not really agree with him, because I found that the drawbacks are kind of too much too much compared to the advantages. So yes, you can prevent somebody from finding your password that way, but if you use the anti-debug protection system, they should not be able to get to it, and that's where it goes into place. Otherwise, another way to obfuscate things is not to have a string in clear at that level, but instead to do a calculation here and have a formula about that long with part of a string, this, that, plus this, ASCII, char, val, whatever. However, remember that we're in a debugger. It will take 5 minutes more, but if the guy knows what he's doing, he's going to see one byte arriving after the other, and he will get your password. So yeah, there are always possibilities to hack something. The question is your software and the data it is protecting precious enough that somebody will go to the extent that is necessary based on the protection you are pushing it? Personally, I have a tendency to think that if I'm spending too much of my time on the protection system, there is a time where the return on investment just fall completely, and that's when you really have to stop. So using Francis Morel components to protect my thing, it's a few $100 and it takes me 5 minutes. Now that is what I call a very, very good investment of my time and my money. Going to the extent of encrypting this kind of thing and knowing that each time I have a maintenance issue I'm going to get screwed, not so much. But of course that is something that you will have to determine for yourself, because you're the one doing the work, and you may not react the same way than I am, and you may not be in the same situation either. One of the way maybe to solve all this problem would be to store the collection of information that is the basis of the calculation with the database. The collection, not the one part that are taken into account. So if you basically, if you say, okay, this is all the information I can gather on the system, and you create a document that is in fact the machine description, technical description. So you have all the information, the name, the MAC address, the quantity of memory, everything. Well, this is part of my maintenance system. When there's a problem, I get to that, and I know what your machine is, and I know where it's coming from. So you have a very, very valid reason to have that. Now, if on top of that you are extracting the information for your code based on that, then, and nobody knows which one you're using, remember. And that would be a solution to use your secondary program on that to extract the information. It is a bastardized solution. And on that point, I've been talking with Francis about that problem. And yes, there is no perfect solution. This is the kind of ultimate protection that you may want to put in place in some specific cases. Now, remember one thing. As soon as you start using the replication as your backup system, these problems are kind of disappearing, because, well, if there's a problem with that specific dataset, the dataset is going to be available somewhere else. You can even temporarily unroll your own machine and replicate the database of the customer and work on that one. Why not? Now, if the one solution easy is the team viewer on the customer machine and debug there, that's one easy. And if you don't have any problem with the backup because they are replicated, then they are replicated, and that's the end of it. So it is all part of a security strategy, and well, you have to make some hard decision at some point. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was,
Too much?
the whole thing is just kind of interesting, you know, outside of your specific project here. There are all kinds of people, they have all these things that they think make things secure. I'm sitting there going, you know what? If a person can take the executable and they can get the keys to the kingdom, then nothing is secure. You've almost wasted your time encrypting the database because
You have, no question. And you also have wasted your time writing your licensing protection schema.
Is it going to go out to the house and lock door? It's going to go out to the unlocked door. Now, if someone wants something from your house, you're not going to stop them.
Yeah.
But you make getting into your data so difficult that you outlast their attention span. It's great. There's no perfect protection. There is only, this is going to be so difficult, it's not worth your time.
And the funny thing really is that the easiest way to implement to protect your program, it's 5 minutes and it's the most efficient, it's the already made protection component. So if at any point you want to protect something, that's the first step. I'm pushing it not because I want to get business to Francis. I'm pushing it because it's the only solution that makes any sense. Now, once again, who is going to be the attacker? What is in your database? Is it worth it to put any kind of protection? There are, in fact, some cases where you say, well, you know what? I'm not even going to protect my software against copy. Please copy it. Use it. No problem. At some point you'll get in trouble. You'll need me.
right.
That may be the best solution for you. I don't know. It is really a question where there's no one answer. It is we need to each time evaluate what's going on. What next? Guys, don't let me hanging. I don't want to work. Oh. Because if you're not asking any question, it means that I explained everything perfectly. That's very flattering, of course, but I don't believe it for 1 second. What I just highlighted, here is the collection of procedure of the protection component. We cannot get to the source of those, obviously, because it's a protected component. But this is what you have in every of them, each one of them. You have the, in fact, which is the documentation, technical documentation, what you can do with it. That I'm going to translate in French, in English very soon. Nothing else? No? No question at all. Wow. Roberto, help me out. So, I'm really happy that's not on the recording. So, each and every one of you is able to come here, take the microphone, and redo the whole presentation. No? Okay, do you want to do an overview of the replication system this thing is based on? Or do you already know it all and you don't need it? Guys, you can answer me. It is authorized, one way or another, or any suggestion.
I need time to digest this, and then, I have to think it through before I can come up with any questions.
Okay.
Time is cheaper for you all right now.
That's true. My brain only works so fast. Come on.
Okay, let me see if I can find anything else interesting in that thing. We talked about that. I didn't show you that, but one line of code is not really worth it. Same thing. Talked about this. That is the WXR collection of procedures, so you know about that already. That is the collection of procedure I was telling you about for the checkbox management. Things that store binary value inside an integer. And I did it directly on integer on 8, so you could have a checkbox that is that goes till the end of time. That's basically a loop on each of the thing, and it returns a long int that you can store in your database, by example, very easily. So you have 3 functions: checkbox to integer, integer to checkbox, and then one so that you can directly check against the integer to see if any rank is checked or not. What I found out when using this is that sometimes you have a UI, sometimes you don't, and you still need to be able to manage the value. When you have a UI, well, you can check directly against the checkboxes. Checkbox of 5 true, then do this or that. When you don't have one, well, you use that function instead against the binary, and it's going to check the corresponding rank of to see if it's 1 or 0. That's all. I'm pretty sure that there are more elegant way of doing this using binary logic operators. However, I forgot that language a long time ago, and I didn't want to spend the time learning it again just for that, so I use the way that works. Yes.
This is not specifically about this, but maybe it's in there somewhere. Frequently I have a desire to replace a single field in a data record. And in FoxPro I can actually do that. I can just replace a field. But I've never found a way in WinDev to do it without getting the whole record, putting something into the field, and then saving the whole record back, and then having to worry about, well, in the meantime, somebody updated one of the fields that I didn't. So is there
Well,
an approach?
there are two. The first one is to say nobody's going to touch that record because I'm locking it while I'm working. So in that case, you're doing your H with seek with the lock option, and nobody's touching you. The second way is to use an update query. In that case, you're creating a SQL statement saying, update. I'm not going to talk to you in SQL because I don't speak SQL currently. I use the SQL, the query editor. But basically, you're doing an update of one specific record where the key is equal that value, and your update is field equal that value. You send that to the database, and it is done in once. In fact, the same thing, exact same thing is going to happen. They're going to read the record, put the value in it, and save it again. But for you, it's just going to be an H execute query. But that's all.
And that's the way that I do it. I write a SQL, update table, set column 1 equal to value where blah blah, 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 and then I put it in Ajax Qt SQL query.
I've never used that technique. I've always done the hreadseek lock modify, but it is so fast anyway that to have somebody modify something at the same time in the same record, it's already very rare. If you lock it and you manage locking in your program correctly, there's no problem.
I was just hoping to avoid block and potential block on something else. So the update SQL sounds like they will take care of all the magic behind the scenes, and that does it.
Yeah, they're doing the exact same thing that you're doing, and I'm not sure they have any more magic than you have, but
You count a lot when you have to test the results of your Ajax Qt SQL query to see whether or not it's succeeding.
because clearly if two people are doing the same update at the same time, you have the same risk of locking than anything else. It's just done somewhere else, that's all.
Well, that actually brings a follow-on question, because, and again, I relate to Foxborough, so I'll just talk about it from that perspective. Two people go at the same record, they will lock and do one, and then lock and do the other. So in other words, there's a kind of a time window. It's like, well, I tried to get the record, I couldn't. I'll wait just a little bit and see if I get lucky. I'll try to get the record and I couldn't. Okay, it's been too long, I give up. I'll return, the record is locked. So I didn't know if, the WinDev, one try and that's it, or will it sit there and try to, hang on it and get it done?
Well, there is a way to tell when, I don't remember exactly what it is, but I know that I used it in the past to say that there are 2, 3, 4, 5 tries before you return the locked error to the code. There's a function somewhere I've heard that sets that. It's probably some kind of hlock set or whatever. I'm not sure. There is a function that will tell any method that finds a lock method to retry 2, 3, 4, 5 times. However, this is going to be extremely fast anyway. And you may want to just have, after that, a loop with 1 second and you restart 1 second later. Depends on what you're doing, really. But also, there is a way to minimize the chances of having locks like that. And one good example of that is a form window. When you edit a record, that record is going to sit on the screen for quite some time. And the bad way to do it is to open the window and lock the record at the time you're opening the window. A good way to do it is say, okay, maybe somebody is going to modify something somewhere else during that time, but I'm going to manage it at the time of the save. I'm going to verify if something had changed. And if something had changed, I'm going to either merge the changes or ignore them or ask the user what to do. The last solution is being asking the user what to do is the one that never works. It never works. In my experience, this is a waste of time. Yeah, they don't know. Either they're afraid and they call you, which is a waste of time again, because you don't know their data anyway. Or they always say yes, and whatever default option is there is going to be the one used, whether it's the right one or not. And they will never ever contact the other guy to ask him why he changed this while you were changing that. So that is just not worth it. I personally prefer to use the field by field last in wins take technique. It's less destructive ones. Yes?
So you've written a routine that sweeps through?
I have written several routines of the type doing. No, that is different. And the replication is looping through all the fields to transfer the data. There is no lock mechanism in the hmodify for that.
I remember, did the replication check for changes? Because it only, replicate the change.
It does, but it is only at the level of the replication. It does not check if somebody else modified the record at the same time on the same machine. So you have all the bases necessary to check that absolutely. You have the comparison to the previous record to find what the change were. So in the replication, you have an example that you can use to do that. Because the replication system, when you're doing a hmodify, your code is calling hmodify. At that point, you have in memory a representation of your record. And you have on disk, you have a different one because you're modifying it. So my system is using an alias to read the original record and compare it to what you're sending for the hmodify. And field by field, checking if it's different. And only these fields are sent to the server. So that is the basis that you would use to do your no-lock mechanism save, where you would have the original record that you had when opening the window, the record that you have when saving the window, and the record on disk, and check between the three to see if there was an outside change, that's between 1 and 3, and if there was inside change, that is between 1 and 2. And at that point, is there any conflict between the two or not?
So your basic window approach is to get the record, save it, display it, work with it, save it, get the record on disk again, compare, and then decide and save.
Yeah.
Who's to say what he's comparing? Somebody didn't change the record again.
Eventually, you just lose.
At this point, yeah, but it is going very fast. So during the time where your form is open and you're working on the record, there is a good chance that statistically that somebody is going to change it. During the time you're doing the whole thing, there is a way less change. And if you don't want to allow that, that's when you're locking the record. So you're reading it from disk, locking it, nobody can change it. You do your stuff, okay, that's what I need to do, write it. You had the record locked for a few hundredths of a second, because it doesn't take that long in memory to do all that. And after that, if somebody else is reading the record and changing it after you, but that's life. There's nothing you can do about it. So sorry?
I found the h.number retry for locks.
Oh,
Sometimes it'll try and lock them.
and the name of the function is?
h.nv retry.
Oh, yeah. I knew there was something. I just couldn't remember what it is.
Default setting for
I think 5? No?
It actually 50 by default.
50. Okay.
50 retries, 50 milliseconds,
50
Retries.
number of attempts.
What's the name of the function?
h.nv retry here.
H dot?
Yeah.
H.dot.
It's not a function, it's a property of the system. Yeah. I've been using that thing for 20 years and I can never remember it because it's the one that you're using once somewhere in the routine and then it's just there. So
do you change the default setting or do you go with the default?
there's no right answer to that question.
Is that persistent throughout the application? Or
Yes, as far as I remember.
It's a variable you can set, and it should probably, it looks like it's the life of the execution.
So you can change it from at every place before you do hmodify. If you want to set it a different value for different files for specific reason, there's a high traffic file that there were lots of changes, so you want to set it higher, otherwise you set it lower. It's I remember that at the time when I first started to use it, I was in a case where I set it to 1 and I was doing it myself afterwards. I was looping, but with a much slower pace. I was basically saying, there's no point in doing that 50 times in a tenth of a second. Let's instead do it once, wait half a second, then do it a second time. And when I had locks like that, basically I was doing one retry and that was enough. So I don't know which one is the best method. Once again, that's going to be really going in the details into your specific case. Anything else? It looks like we went directly to the open mic session, so let's do this. Oh yeah, you can cut the recording. Absolutely, yeah. No, cut it. There's no point in that.